This is Tinian, a far-flung island in the Pacific. It's easy to miss on a map, but for a moment in history it held the power to end the world. The island is home to North Field, the base which American B-29 bombers took off from to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Following the war, the US had little use for the island. North Field was abandoned and became part of the jungle. Now though, for the first time in 80 years, the foliage is being cleared. New satellite imagery shows construction teams restoring the old airstrip, this time not for Japan, but for a new enemy. You see, Tinian is re-emerging at the height of an escalating arms race between the United States and China. Beijing's arsenal of missiles has developed so much so that it can now strike distant targets across the Pacific, including American bases in the second island chain. That throws a wrench into the Pentagon's military strategy. Washington, you see, can no longer rely on what's called its hub-and-spoke tactic, a Cold War-era model where much of its military presence in the Pacific was built around larger bases in Guam and Okinawa. So to adapt, the United States is turning to a strategy called Agile Combat Employment, or more tellingly, Scatter and Survive. As the name suggests, this is no longer about winning a war with China, it's about surviving one. The strategy involves dispersing American resources and manpower across a larger area instead of keeping them all in one spot. So if a major base was threatened, the Pentagon could move its aircraft and personnel across a network of smaller bases. Meanwhile, the major bases would no longer be an Achilles heel, and would serve as logistics hubs to these smaller bases. This complicates things for the Chinese. Beijing's plans are to dominate the first island chain by 2030, and the second by 2050. Now it's testing the waters, quite literally so. Just a few days ago, the PLA Navy's Liaoning aircraft carrier was spotted crossing the Miyako Strait near the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. It represented the first time a Chinese carrier had crossed the second island chain. A second carrier, the Shandong, was also spotted alongside the Liaoning the following week. All things considered, the balance of power is starting to shift. So now, in a bid to stay in the fight, the Pentagon is scrambling to restore long-forgotten air bases throughout the Pacific. But there's a catch. Most of these bases aren't on American soil. They belong to nations with whom relations with Washington aren't quite what they used to be. So it's not about just clearing the jungle and pouring concrete, it's also a political minefield. Meanwhile, Beijing isn't standing still. On the southern tip of Hainan Island sits Yulin Naval Base. Commissioned in 1955 and now valued at over $18 billion, the base is home to China's most advanced submarines and surface fleets. Together with the hundreds of military bases spread across the Chinese mainland, it sends a message that Beijing is in the Pacific to stay. So whilst the US Navy may still win in terms of raw firepower, the scale and speed of China's rearmament has Washington on edge. When China's Liaoning aircraft carrier crossed the second island chain for the first time, it's only amplified the paranoia. To make matters worse, recent footage out of Beijing showed a nuclear-capable bomber launching a simulated attack on what appeared to be Anderson Base in Guam. Of course, it isn't real, but for the United States, losing Guam to a Chinese missile strike would be like losing your queen in the opening moves, something of a crippling blow before the battle even begins. Home to Anderson Air Force Base, a deep-water naval base, nuclear-armed submarines and long-range B-52 and B-2 bombers, Guam is central to America's foothold in the Pacific. Sitting less than 2,000 miles from the Taiwan Strait, its strategic location and proximity to Asia has turned it into a launchpad for American operations in the event of a regional conflict. But whilst this is an asset, it's become a double-edged sword. Whilst it gives Washington leverage over the Pacific, it's put it well within range of Chinese ballistic missiles. And that brings us back to what got this all going in the first place. China's arsenal includes the DF-26, an intermediate-range ballistic missile designed to destroy targets deep in the Pacific Ocean. Nicknamed the Guam Express, the DF-26 can reach cruising speeds of up to 18 times the speed of sound, with a range of about 4,000 kilometers. Estimates from the Pentagon suggest that China now possesses about 500 DF-26 missiles and about 250 launchers. Then there's the DF-17, another medium-range ballistic missile. Though its cruise speed is considerably lower than the DF-26, it's designed to carry the hypersonic DF-ZF glide vehicle. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles which follow predictable parabolic flight paths, glide vehicles can change trajectory mid-flight, making them difficult for radar systems to track and almost impossible to intercept. So with these missiles in service and a bright red bullseye painted on Guam, the Pentagon is turning to multi-target defense systems such as THAAD, Aegis and Patriot interceptors. But as we've seen recently in Israel, even the best air defences can be overwhelmed. So now Washington is going back to the drawing board. You see, despite covering a third of the Earth's surface, the Pacific Ocean funnels naval movements into a handful of maritime choke points. Throughout the Second World War, Japan understood this. Its control of the Mariana Islands and the broadest second island chain allowed Tokyo to deny Washington access to the Philippine Sea. But when America took the islands in 1944, it brought the B-29 bomber, armed with thermonuclear bombs, well within range of mainland Japan. That, of course, was checkmate. So whilst the threat has changed, the geography hasn't. The Mariana Islands still hold the same strategic value as they did back then. It's why Tinian's North Field is being brought back to life, and that's not all. Much of the restoration work in the Pacific falls under the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, a $9.9 billion program designed to reinforce Washington's presence west of the international date line. In Guam, the Northwest Field is being rebuilt, alongside new facilities for 5,000 US Marines transferring from Okinawa. In Palau, jungle crews are clearing an old airfield on Paleliu, the site of a famous battle during the Second World War. Over in the Philippines, the American naval base in Subic Bay is being expanded, and $35 million has been allocated for upgrades to Basa Air Base. Down under, air bases in Tyndall and Darwin are being upgraded, one to host B-52 bombers and the other to support larger aircraft already flying into Australia from the United States. All of this ties into the scatter and survive doctrine of distributing aircraft, manpower and cargo across dozens of smaller sites. The problem is that outside of the Mariana Islands, almost none of these former airfields fall under American jurisdiction, and that's a problem. Following the Second World War, the United States secured the allegiance of Palau, Micronesia and the Marshall Islands through a set of agreements known as the Compacts of Free Association. It gave Washington exclusive access to the islands in exchange for financial subsidies, access to welfare programs, and for their citizens, visa-free entry into the United States. But those days are numbered. Washington needs more legal rights to build the infrastructure it needs. And though this might seem simple on paper, the region's history of American imperialism and nuclear testing have made it anything but. In 2023, the Palauan Senate passed a resolution rejecting the permanent deployment of American Patriot batteries on its territory. Moreover, the installation of a new over-the-horizon radar system has raised concerns about indigenous land use and a lack of transparency from the Pentagon. The same cries can be heard in Micronesia, where the US Air Force has allocated $400 million to repurpose the country's airport for military operations. By and large, people across the region know that their nations will just be pawns in a future war, and they want no part in that. To make matters worse for Washington, Beijing is quietly winning hearts and minds across the Pacific. Business deals between Chinese investors and local lawmakers, along with opportunities for islanders to study and work in China, have transformed Beijing into a credible alternative for long-term partnerships. This might not seem like a big change, but for a region where American power has long been the norm, it's a noticeable one. So whilst the Pentagon is looking to remilitarize the Pacific, most of its inhabitants would rather remain neutral or make sure China is equally involved. After all, peace isn't guaranteed, it's negotiated. I hope you managed to learn a thing or two from this video. A lot of effort goes into making them, and if you haven't yet subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.